Back tonight on In Focus. Right, let's continue our conversation on the devastating floods in South Africa, currently being experienced in 7 out of the 9 provinces, KwaZulu-Natal being one of those provinces. The Democratic Alliance in the province is concerned about the state of disaster management. We are now joined by the party's provincial CoGTA spokesperson, Martin Meyer. Martin, good to have you, and thank you very much for your time. What raises concerns for you? What are the red flags that you're seeing?
Well, we submitted some parliamentary questions very recently to the MEC for CoGTA regarding the Disaster Management Centre after what happened in April and May last year. And 2 very concerning things. One is that it's a staffing matter. Only 18 of the posts in the Disaster Management Centre is filled, with 17 vacant posts, so almost half the posts are vacant. And the MEC then goes further to admit that 13 of those 17 vacant posts are critical posts. So we're sitting with a critically understaffed disaster management centre that just can't deal with the issues that come, and it's hitting our province now month after month. The second great concern to us is the budget. From a high of 206 million in 2016, the budget has been slashed to a mere 30 million rand in the last budget year. We haven't seen the budget for the next financial year yet, which also means it's a critically underfunded centre. And those 2 things combined leads us to have great concern. And then we saw this first with the riots in July 2021, and then with the double floods we had last year, where the disaster management centre just was unable to cope with the disasters in our province.
Yeah. It feels like deja vu to me, because this is exactly the same conversation I had with you when the disaster hit last year. I later on raised the very same issues that you're raising with the then MEC for CoGTA, which was now Sihle Zikalala. The posts, which means have not been filled since then, and the budget issue has not been addressed since then. And what has been the impact?
Sorry, I did lose you there for a second.
I'm saying, what then has been the impact? I mean, what have you seen as far as, we're not even talking about responding to the floods now, in terms of the response to the previous disaster that we were dealing with?
Well, first of all, when the floods happened, the responses was very, very slow. We know that the Western Cape Disaster Management Centre gave warnings to their counterparts in KwaZulu-Natal on the Sunday before the main floods hit in March. And only on Thursday did we start seeing action, when the city of eThekwini was really devastated by the floods by our own local disaster management centre. We also know that no warning was given. It's very shocking. When I visited the disaster management centre last week, it was the day that we started getting the warnings for the current floods that we've been having for the last few days. And neither the director nor the deputy director was actually at the disaster management centre. They weren't even in the Pietermaritzburg. They were in eThekwini discussing last year's floods. How's that? And then also we know that the National Centre of Disaster was fought last year. R1 billion was promised by President Ramaphosa. I don't know if that R1 billion might be under a couch somewhere on the farm, because we never saw it. Which means that eThekwini still has sewage flowing in the water. We still have electricity outages. We still have roads across the province not fixed after last year's floods. So the disaster management centre has not dealt with last year's floods. We still have people living in halls across eThekwini and even in Pietermaritzburg. And we're still suffering from those floods. And then when this floods happened, we had, again, very little warning, very little messages going out to the residents, warning them to vacate to higher ground. And now we hear from places like Newcastle and Dundee that volunteers are doing the job that we would expect our government and the disaster management centre to do.
So, I mean, for example, one of the areas that we were discussing, the community itself had to actually put things together and build the bridge themselves, because they were just not getting the response that they were supposed to get. Other communities have not managed to build those bridges. What happens in an instance where now a second disaster strikes in that very same area?
Yeah, absolutely. And we've seen it where damage hasn't been repaired. Obviously now it's cumulative, so it just gets worse and worse and worse. And it's affecting towns. St. Lucia, you saw footage that the only road into St. Lucia, which is a bridge crossing over the river, has now been washed away in these floods. And how long will these people have to wait? And the community immediately jumped. In eThekwini, we had the communities in Chatsworth and a community in Shongweni. In Shongweni, the community raised their own money and then paid the municipality to rebuild the bridge. How is that? It's not their bridge, it's a municipality's bridge, but the community had to pay to make sure it gets done. But in the rural areas, and this latest round of floods is having a much bigger impact in the rural parts of KwaZulu-Natal. We know kids have to cross rivers every day to get to school. There's very low bridges in our rural areas, and these are now being washed. How long will it take? And does that mean that our school children and the elderly people living in these rural areas will now have to do dangerous crossing across rivers to get to school, to get to the shops, to the clinic? And how long will it take to safeguard them for months and months after the floods? We just cannot trust, unfortunately, this ANC-led government in this province and nationally to provide the assistance we need. And we see it again because purely our disaster management center is nothing else but dysfunction.
Do you foresee a situation, I mean, of course it's a provincial response now, not necessarily a municipality's response, but for example, what we saw in eThekwini was this confusion where the deputy mayor would come up and say, well, we requested the money, we've not seen the funds. And a province would say, well, they were supposed to fill in the forms this way and bring in their application, and it didn't come properly. And National will say, well, we have just not seen this application at all. These people have not applied for money from us. And it was a back and forth that went on for maybe a month, if not more, before it was resolved. Do you think that it would be the same process this time around?
Oh, absolutely. And just a correction, it's now the former deputy mayor because they didn't like him asking those questions.
That's right, that's right.
Yes. So, I mean, I myself saw the forms that was done by eThekwini and by the province. The Treasury and KwaZulu-Natal provincial government said to us all the forms are correct. The National said it wasn't. When we kept probing, we then started hearing, no, it's actually not R1 billion coming. It's going to be a loan against the next year's budget. So which means when we go into the next budget period for the province, we will be R1 billion short already going into that budget because it was no longer going to be R1 billion given to the province. It was now going to be a loan against the budget. But to this day, not a cent. Departments were told to reprioritize and then apply. That has been done. Reprioritization has been done in some departments, not in all. But still, nothing. So still we have sewage going into the oceans, beaches open, close, you never quite know. We have a mayor that promised we were going to serve in Mshlanga. I was there. Unfortunately, he didn't join us on that day. And now we heard this week that they even had to cancel some of the lifeguard competitions, saying the beaches are too dangerous, the water, but they still allow the tourists to swim, which is quite shocking. So absolutely. I mean, it is now a national state of disaster. The president has declared so in, I think, 7 of the 9 provinces. I don't know if he's going to promise all 7 provinces R1 billion this time, but we haven't seen the money. There's no reason to believe it will be any different with this newer set of disasters.
So these posts, I mean, if you look at the budget and you're saying there's been massive budget cuts, are likely not going to be filled. How critical are these posts?
Well, I mean, I would say in the disaster management center, every post is critical. You know, and the MEC himself admitted that 13 of these are highly critical posts, which means these are professional people that have to render a certain service during a disaster and before a disaster. And these include people who understand and read the weather patterns, who coordinate between the different departments and municipalities and all those type of critical posts. And this just doesn't exist. And we see this with the response. In our question that we did ask of the MEC, this was not the previous MEC, this was a few weeks ago before the newest round of shuttles. He said to us that there is now currently an advertisement process and all of that. I've looked everywhere. I've been asked to see this advertisement. I couldn't find them. I will submit some new questions to the new MEC. And I will give this to the new MEC. She was on the ground in Newcastle before the second round of floods. It was 2 days ago, if I'm not mistaken. And I do commend her for being on the ground a lot faster than the predecessors was. And I hope this will now push her to see that we have to prioritize filling this post and upping this budget. We have no other option. Global climate change is with us, and we see this in KwaZulu-Natal. Disasters used to be something that happened elsewhere. Now it is a yearly, almost a monthly thing for us in KwaZulu-Natal. It's not if a disaster is going to hit us, it's what disaster is going to hit us these days. And it is because of climate change. And we have to be more prepared. But unfortunately, as usual, preparation does not seem to be one of the words that the ANC is coming.
Martin, appreciate your time. Thanks so much for coming on. Martin Meyer speaks for the Democratic Alliance Cooperative Governance in KwaZulu-Natal, raising